uh, exception of two parameters of supply, namely supply made for consideration but not in the course or furtherance of business, and supply made without consideration. Importance of service for consideration whether or not in the course or furtherance of business. This is only exceptions to the condition of supply being made in the course or furtherance of business. Activity without consideration deemed supply. Importation of service for consideration whether or not in the course or furtherance of business is constituted as supply. Then activity without consideration deemed supply. There are activities or transactions which are treated as supply even if they are made without consideration. Okay, so the first one is permanent transfer or disposal of business assets. Any kind of disposal or transfer of business assets made by entity on the permanent basis, even though without consideration, qualifies as supply. However, it is important to note that this provision would apply only if input tax credit has been availed on such assets. Business assets on which ITC is blocked, not availed under GST, will not be covered within this para, and this will not be deemed as supply. Business assets on which ITC is blocked, not available under GST. Business asset through eligible for ITC. ITC has not been availed by the registered person. Supply between related person or distinct person. Supply of goods or services or both between related person or between distinct person will qualify as supply even if made without consideration, provided it is made in the course or furtherance of business. Related person and distinct person. Related persons, a person who is under the influence of another person is called related person, like member of the same family or subsidiaries or the group of company. Person including legal person are deemed to be related if such person or officer. Okay, legal person. Distinct person. A supplier is required to obtain state-wise registration. He has to obtain registration in every state from where he makes a taxable supply. Whereas he make a taxable supply provided his aggregate turnover exceed a specified threshold limit. Thus, he is not required to obtain registration from a state where he makes a non-taxable supply. Since registration in GST is PAN based, once a supplier is liable to register, he has to obtain registration in each of the states, union territory in which he operates under the same PAN. Further, he is normally required to obtain single registration in a state or union territory. However, he has a multiple place of business in a state or union territory. He may get a single registration of the same said state or union territory. He may also get separate registration for any place of business in a state or union territory. Now let us understand the concept of distinct person. The establishment of a person with separate registration, whether within the same state or in different state, are considered as distinct person. Where a person live having one registered establishment in state or union territory have another establishment in different state or union territory, these establishments are considered as establishment of distinct person. Where a person having one registered establishment in state, okay, who has obtained is required to obtain more than one registration, whether in one state or union territory or more than one state or union territory, shall in respect of each such registration be treated as a distinct person. Stock transfer or branch transfer qualify as supply. It is common practice in business to transfer goods goods transferred amongst different units of the same entity. For instance, distribution of sample manufactured in a factory to different branches, or transfer of goods from factory to depot showroom for sale, therefore from one warehouse to another warehouse, from one branch to another branch, where the demand of the goods is higher. Since the transfer is within the same business, the transferor unit would not charge any amount to the transferee unit. Similarly, it is also possible that one branch supplies services to another branch of the same entity without consideration. These transactions are termed as self-supplies. Under GST, this transaction, though undertaken without consideration, will also qualify as supply, provided the transfer of goods or services is between different locations with separate registration, GST registration of the same legal entity, as these are transactions between distinct persons or establishment of distinct persons. However, transfer between two units of a legal entity under single GST registration, apparently within same state, will not be considered as supply. Branch transfer or stock transfer or branch transfer within same state is not considered as supply. However, transfer between two units of a single entity under single registration, apparently within same state, will not be considered as supply. Branch transfer है ना. Supply of goods or services or both between an employer and employee. Service provided by employee to employer in the course or in relation to its employment are outside the scope of GST. Treated as neither supply of goods nor supply of services. Gift by employer to employee. Gift up to 50,000 in value in a financial year by employer to employee shall not be treated as supply of goods or services or both. However, a gift of value more than 50,000 made without consideration are supply and are subject to GST when made in the course or furtherance of business. Perquisite by employer to employee. Since service by employee to employer in the course of furtherance in relation to employment outside the scope of GST, supply by employer to employee in terms of contractual agreement entered into between employer and employer not subject to GST. Any perquisite provided by employer to employee in terms of contractual agreement into between the employer and the employee of the service provided by employee to the employer in relation to the employment. It follows therefore that perquisite provided by employer to employee in terms of contractual agreement entered into between the employer and employee will not attract GST. Further, ITC under GST does not allow ITC of member of club. Further, the input tax credit scheme under GST does not allow ITC of member of a club, fitness and health center. ITC not allowed membership of a club, health and fitness center. It follows therefore that if such services are provided free of charge to all the employees, then the same will not subject to GST. Through free housing to the employee, the same would hold true for free housing to the employees when the same is provided in terms of the contract between the employer and employee as a part of the partial to cost to company. Free housing is पे कोई GST नहीं. When the same is provided in terms of contract between the employer and employee. Principal agent relationship यहाँ पे in order to determine whether a particular principal agent relationship falls within the ambit of Schedule 1, the deciding factor is whether the invoice of the further supply of goods on behalf of the principal is being issued by the agent or not. The crucial point is whether or not agent has authority to pass or receive the title of the goods on behalf of the principal. Whether invoice for the further supply is being issued by agent in his name, then any provision of good from the principal to the agent shall fall within the scope. They are liable to supply of GST. Sorry, the ambit of pair 2. Anmol appoints Bolu to procure certain goods from the market. Bolu identifies various suppliers who can provide the goods as desired by Anmol and asks the supplier to send the goods and issue the invoice directly to Anmol. There is no relationship principal and agent. So only acting as a procurement agent, and there is no way involved himself to supply or receipt of the goods. Hence, in accordance with the provision of this act, Bolu is not an agent of Anmol for supply of goods in term of para 3. Supply of goods by principal to agent without consideration, where the agent undertake to supply such good on behalf of the principal is considered as supply. Similarly, supply of goods by agent to his principal without consideration, whether the agent undertake to receive such goods on behalf of the principal is considered as supply. Whether a DCA full form? Del carried agent fall under the ambit of agent. Schedule 1 depend on the following possible scenario. In case where the invoice for the supply of goods is issued by the supplier to the customer, either himself or through DSA, the DSA does not fall under the ambit of agent. In case where invoice for the supply of goods is issued by DCA in his own name, the DCA fall under the ambit of agent. Whether the temporary short-term transaction-based loan extended by the DCA to the recipient for included in the value of supply by the DCA agent. Following activity: supply of goods from the supplier to recipient, supply of agency service from DCA to the recipient, supply of extension. It is clarified that in case where DCA is not an agent, the temporary short-term transaction-based loan being provided by DCA to the buyer is a supply of service by the DCA to the recipient on principal-to-principal basis and is an independent supply. Therefore, the interest being charged by the DCA is not form part of the value of supply of goods supplied by supplier. It is clarified that in case where DCA is an agent, the temporary short-term transaction-based credit being provided by DCA to the supplier no longer retains its character independent supply and submerged in supply of DCA. The activity of extension of credit by DCA to the recipient could not be considered a separate supply in the context of supply of goods. Clarified that the value of interest charged for such credit would be required to be included in the value of supply of goods or DCA to the recipient. Importation of service by a person from related person or from his establishment located outside India without consideration in the course or furtherance of business shall be treated as supply.